Welcome back to day 132 and 133 of our Bible in a Year reading plan, which are our catch-up days. So in today's video, we are going to do a brief recap of Job chapters 15 through 39, and then we're going to do a brief reflection on some of the things that we read in Job, and then we will have a brief introduction into our next book of the Bible, which will be the book of Psalms. So let's get into our recap. So far we've read Job chapters 15 through 39. And in these chapters, we've seen Job's friends speak. We've seen Job respond to his friends. And pretty much Job's friends keep trying to insist that Job must have done something wicked, have committed some kind of sin because of the things that he's suffered and the things that he's gone through. Job continues to tell his friends, I'm innocent. I haven't done anything. We also see Job crying out to God in these chapters and, asking God, why won't he answer him? He talks about how he's been seeking the Lord, but he hasn't found him, that God is not answering. He's not hearing. He's asking to stand before the Lord so that he can plead his case before God. And so Job is really just crying out to God in these sections, as well as being accused of doing wrong by his friends. And but his friends I don't think they're trying to hurt Job. I think they're coming from a place of really wanting to help Job and trying to, because Job is saying, God is doing this to me. He's beating on me. He's causing my suffering. And, they're like, Job, God doesn't punish the righteous. He is a just God. He is a fair God. He is a good God, and he gives good things to the righteous and the just, and he doesn't cause harm to the righteous. He only punishes the wicked. And so, they have this view of God, which is kind of one-dimensional. And they would never think of something suffering being caused by God to someone who is innocent. And so they have like this view of God and which we get sometimes too, is that, we as believers, that only good things are supposed to happen to us, when in fact, men and women of God, people that are good people, they're righteous, they still may suffer. And so I really enjoyed this in these parts of Job, because we see Job wrestling with this idea of suffering in the world and, wicked people excelling and not being punished on this side of heaven. And then righteous people like Job being, going through suffering and enduring trials, and, the poor and the helpless being oppressed by the wicked. So I really like that tension in Job that kind of explains the human condition and human suffering. But all right, that's the end of our recap. Now let's jump into our reflection. Our reflection question comes from day 131, where we read Job chapters 30 through 34. And it says, explore the wisdom of Elihu and his insights into the nature of suffering and God's justice in Job 32 through 33. How does Elihu's emphasis on the purpose of suffering and refining and purifying the righteous challenge you to view trials and hardships as opportunities for spiritual growth and maturity? Amen. So Elihu was the last of Job's friends to speak, and he was the youngest of the group. So he didn't really say anything until the older gentlemen were finished speaking. And so Elihu is telling Job, his other friends, Bildad and Zophar, pretty much were like, God doesn't punish the righteous, and all that stuff. But Elihu comes to Job and he says, we go through things, we go through hardships because God is trying to bring us back to him and to bring some kind of correction, some kind of adjustment, some kind of alignment in our lives. And I know a lot of believers that we don't think that way. We think that when we are going through trials, when we're going through hardships, like I mentioned before, a lot of us as believers believe that because we're believers, because we're walking with God, we're fellowshipping with him and we're in relationship with him, that we're not supposed to go through anything. And sometimes, like with the instance of Job, God allowed the devil to go and test Job, to test Job's faithfulness to God, because God told the devil, he said, have you tried my servant Job? because God knew that Job was going to hold fast to his faith in God. Now, this question says, how does this challenge us to view trials and hardships as opportunity for spiritual growth and maturity? And so sometimes God does send trials and tests to us to help refine us, to help grow us. As we say these prayers and we ask God to give us patience, well, how do you think God is going to develop patience in you? He's going to put you in situations where you have to be patient. He's going to give you things that happen that you're going to have to exercise patience. He's not just going to magically drop patience down into your spirit. It's something that you have to learn and grow through. Same thing, if you say, God, I want to be more loving, God is going to put you in situations where you have to show love to people. He's going to give you some kind of trial, some kind of test to help grow you. Same thing if we are asking God, to help us in our faith and to grow our faith. He's going to give us situations where we have to be faithful, where our faith has to be stretched. He may cause a job loss because we need to grow our faith and trust in him. And so God causes us to lose our job. And now, because we don't have that job anymore that we were putting our faith and trust in, now we have to put our faith and trust in God. And so God is growing our faith. He's stretching our faith because now we don't have that job to rely on. The only thing we can rely on is God in this moment because we are jobless. We don't know how we're going to put food on the table. We don't know how we're going to pay our bills. The only thing we can do is cry out to God and trust him to work it out. And so we have to take our hardships that we go through as men and women of God and look at them and say, okay, God, what are you trying to teach me in this area? What are you trying to, especially if you know that you've been faithful, you've been doing what you're supposed to do, and things happen, it may just be God trying to grow you and stretch you and to get you to mature more in your faith. But all right, that is the end of our reflection. If you had any aha moments from the reflection, make sure you let me know what they are in the comments. Or if you've had situations where God has a hardship that's come up that has caused you to grow in your faith, share it with me down in the comments. I would love to hear about it. All right, now next we're going to look ahead into next week. So next week we are going to wrap up the book of Job and we are going to start the book of Psalms. And the book of Psalms is one of my favorite books. Most of the Psalms were written by King David. He wrote a large majority of the Psalms. And then you also have Psalms by Asaph, who was one of the music directors. We actually read about Asaph when we were in earlier when we were doing, Ezra and all that stuff, Kings and stuff, we learned about Asaph. So Asaph also wrote a few of the Psalms. And then you had Psalms written by other people, which they tell you as you're reading the Psalms, who wrote them. But I really love the book of Psalms. Some of my favorite Bible passages are in the book of Psalms. So I look forward to reading this with you guys. A lot of these Psalms are songs to be sung, and then some of them are prayers, and then some of them are just what we call laments. And a lament is when a person cries out to God and they're asking God, God, I need help, I need your assistance, I need you to come through, I need you to do something for me. It's people crying out to God, kind of like we saw with Job when Job was like, God, why aren't you answering to me? Why aren't you responding to me? But the thing with a lament is that a lament always starts with a cry out to God, but they always end in a praise. So that's how you can tell when something is a lament. If it starts with a cry out to God, crying out to God for help, crying out to God for assistance, or complaining to God about something, and then at the end it turns into praise and worship of God, that is an example of a lament. So there are a lot of laments in the Psalms. Like I said, a lot of these Psalms are written by King David. And so I love these Psalms because it really shows why King David was considered a man after God's own heart. But all right, guys, that is the end of today's video. I pray that you are blessed. I hope you enjoyed the reflection. Don't forget to give the video a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel so that you can get the notification for day 134 of our Bible in a Year reading plan. All right, everyone. Bye.